Hello, friends. Welcome to the Ancient Health Podcast, where East meets West. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Motley, and I have Dr. Andrew Salzman here with me today. And he is a Harvard-trained physician. I get very aware when I talk to very smart people about anything I say that may be, not bright, I guess, basically. But Doc, I really appreciate you coming here and talking to us about a lot of subjects, about Wonderfeel and about different things with nutrition and supplementation. It's going to be a great combo. Thank you so much, Doc, for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Well, one of the things that I'm really aware of now in the whole arena of health is going to be the process of aging and longevity, about how to age well, how to age gracefully. And the things I've been reading about you was how you started to publish work about the microbiome, about the leaky gut. And you were talking about longevity, from what I've seen, for a very long time. And you were ahead of this. You're ahead of the bell curve, if that's what. And so, that one thing I was really impressed with was that you were writing things before that they're trying to say now. So, before we dive into that, Doc, can you give us a bit of a background about yourself? Tell us about yourself. I just love to learn about who you are.
So I was at Yale College, where I was studying Shakespeare and biochemistry. And then I went to Harvard Medical School. And following that, I went to Columbia University, where I did a residency in pediatrics. At the conclusion of that, I became very interested in infectious disease. So I went to the Weizmann Institute in Israel, and there I studied immunology. Following that, I was asked back to Harvard, where I did a fellowship in pediatric infectious disease, and that led me to become very interested in really critically ill kids. So I went to the Mass General there at Harvard, and I did a fellowship in pediatric intensive care, and while there, became also interested in really small children. So I did another fellowship in neonatal intensive care, and then I did several years of research immunology fellowship. After that, I was asked to found and lead the new division of critical care medicine at Children's Hospital in Cincinnati. We built one of the largest ICUs in the country for kids, and I built a research division focused on inflammation and septic shock. And after 5 years of that, I decided I could perhaps contribute more, do a better job by designing new drugs to help kids and others, rather than just being at the bedside as a clinician. So I started a small company, and that led to a 140-person company within a year or two. And we developed the first PARP inhibitor for treatment of cancer. And that was licensed to Genentech in a very large deal, a $600 million deal. It was the first potent PARP inhibitor for man. And then I went on to become interested in eye disease. I worked on a new pathway that we had discovered in glaucoma, and we discovered the first adenosine 1 receptor agonist. The company went on to the NASDAQ at $400 million based on that work. I then moved to Israel, and there I started a small startup on metabolic disease in kids. We're looking at a very rare but very lethal, severe metabolic disease called homocystinuria, and I co-invented the first drug for that. And that worked actually in the clinic. And that was sold to Retrofin for $510 million at a later point in development. I then built a research institute in northern Israel, where I was focused on lung disease. We brought in about $150 million in funding for that, and research funding mainly from the NIH, from BARDA, Health and Human Services, Office of Naval Research, and so forth. I've had at least over 100 NIH grants. I've got about 50 patents. I love to discover new molecules, new pathways, new ways to treat disease. So I'm a physician and a scientist, an investigator, and then I had the wonderful opportunity to join Wonderfeel, which is a great, really great opportunity for me to take what I learned, the concepts, and to build a company in San Francisco led by a very passionate and very charismatic CEO who really wanted to take on the problem of longevity, which of course is one of the most perplexing but most important conditions. And so together we've worked hand in hand, and we've developed a product already, and we have several more in the pipeline. And so this is now the focus of the latter part of my career.
Wow. Doc, that is amazing. That kind of, background. I'm super impressed with that much knowledge and being able to help children and help people in so many arenas. When we're talking about longevity, is there a lot of links when we're talking about longevity within the cell to, we'll say, infections? So I'm not trying to go down that rabbit hole, but I'm saying with infections and diseases, with NAD or the longevity, like the molecules you're finding now, is it bumping up the cell's energy within Wonderfield to help your body clean out infections, help with energy levels? Can you give us a backdrop of the basic structure of your longevity product?
Yeah. So I began in 1988 studying leaky gut as a way
Mm-hmm.
to better understand septic shock in kids. And then in the mid 90s, I began to study NAD, understanding how cells respond to emergency damage from oxidant stress. And so those were in their own right had a life of their own. They were addressing various diseases at the time, but we didn't understand at that time. We didn't even appreciate the role that they might have in longevity. That happened much later in my career. So now it's sort of circling back. It's somewhat
Mm-hmm.
ironic, but I'm almost going back to where I started, which is the interests I had in the late 80s and early 90s in other diseases, which now are really first and foremost out there for. So it's a wonderful way to bring that back and to take that knowledge and now apply it to perhaps the most difficult opportunity of all, which is aging.
Wow. And with aging, there is so much more emphasis on aging, but are we talking about not necessarily reversing, or is it reversing the aging process or stabilizing? Because some people have asked me in the office, Doc, here, they'll go, well, are you talking about reversing your aging? Like you can live a lot longer or not, say some people want to live at 120. Are we talking about slowing the process down? Are we saying like giving the nutrients for it to work better? Could you simplify it
Yeah.
for me?
So aging is an inexorable process in all living animals and plants. I mean, every single organism, be it a plant or an animal, has a lifespan that's predestined based
Mm-hmm.
on a number of trade-offs that have occurred during evolution to program the organism to survive for a very short time, but a very vigorous, energetic, like a bumblebee. Very short
Yeah.
lifespan, but tremendous energy,
Mm-hmm.
activity, or to very normal lifespan, I would say, like for a human. And then we look at some of the outliers, like the lake shark that goes to 400 years, the tortoise to 200 years, some of the trees which go to 2,000 years, where their evolution has or adapted to longevity per se, but the organism has a trade-off. It's not very active. It doesn't do very much. The lake shark hardly
Ah.
moves, but it commits most of its energy to repairing its DNA. So it has this tremendous longevity at the cost, at the price, of not being the bumblebee, not being very active. So every organism has secured its niche ecologically and found its place. And humans are sort of in the middle. People live to 80, 90, maybe 120 is the theoretical maximum. But programmed in genetically, there is a series or a set of events that occur as we get older that really have to do with wear and tear and loss of genetic integrity. Our genes start to fall apart, just like an old car, ultimately falls apart. If you drive it long enough, things get worn out. Some cars are designed to live for a year or two, and some cars, are fantastically built and can withstand all the stresses and may be working 30, 40 years later. So the humans are somewhat in the middle. As we
Mm.
understand the mechanisms better, though, about what governs this process, there are really two opportunities in front of us. The first is to live better, to have more
Mm.
health while we're alive, to be more vigorous, to think better, to be on our toes, not to see the dissipation of our energy over time or the advent of disease, to force to slow it down so that we live a
Wow.
healthier, happier life. And you see this in the community in a number of different ways. I mean, people encourage exercise, good diet, good nutrition, staying away from harm. taking the right medicines if you need them, nutraceutical supplements. So there's a whole march forward to try to live better and healthier. And that is certainly something that we strive for at Wonderfield. On the other hand,
Oh,
there's a second opportunity, which is more in the realm of theory at the moment, which is to actually extend the theoretical lifetime. So instead of, say, being
mm,
120 years being the
mm,
cap, maybe we can go to 150, 180, 200 or longer, like the lake shark,
mm.
out at 400, or the tortoise, at 180. Can we do that? And that involves, again, knowledge. You have to understand why we age and how we age, what's causing it, what are the underlying mechanisms, why does this happen? I mean, why is the bumblebee
Yes.
or the fly dead in a few weeks? As we understand that, we're then able to intervene intelligently. And so that's the second goal at Wonderfield, to have us actually live longer.
Yes. And Doc, and hopefully I love that point you just said. Why do we age? Or like we were talking about like eating well and helping our bodies to, promote healthy aging. But when does aging like start for a person? Maybe that's a very, very basic question. But when you start saying when does it start in our lives? When we were born, like right at the womb, or and then as we start to age, like what are some of the major things you see that would just like instead of the lake
Sure.
shark, it's going to be living that long for us? What are things that
Right,
promote
right.
our fast aging?
Well, it's interesting. The aging process is not uniform across all the tissues and organs. Some age very quickly and some not so quickly. I'll give you an example. In
Mm-hmm.
women, when they're born, they have a set of eggs, and those eggs will be available to them for the rest of their lives. There are no new eggs. There are eggs that mature into follicles that ultimately may become fertilized and become babies, but they're there at the beginning. So the aging process for the ovary begins at birth. Whereas if you
Mm-hmm.
look at the muscular strength of someone, we're all familiar that people reach their peak muscular strength probably in their early early 20s, let's say, maybe mid 20s. You certainly see that on the athletic field with baseball players.
Mm-hmm.
It's very clear when someone's a rookie and then it becomes really top notch, fantastic athlete, in their early 20s. As they get into their 30s, we call them veterans. And by the time they're are they going to retire? So clearly, what's happened is that the same with basketball players, really any sport, track runners. So the
Mm-hmm.
muscles and the ligaments and the bones are not the same in a 40-year-old that they would be, say, in a 20-year-old. And then as we get older, we start to see other things happen, the early signs of dementia, possibly, or organ dysfunction, or digestive problems, cancer. So all of these things are aging at a different rate, and we're familiar with that. We know that it's unusual to see cancer in 20-year-olds, much more common in 80-year-olds. We know that vascular
Mm-hmm.
dementia and Alzheimer's is unusual to see in a 10-year-old, extraordinarily rare, but not uncommon in a 90-year-old. So we understand intuitively from our experience all these different aging processes as they occur in parallel in different organs. So the
Mm.
question is, when does it start? It depends on the organ. But we can generally say that people are at their peak in their early 20s overall. And then by the
It's
time they're 30 or 40, they're they're aging. And
just
therefore, we'll talk about why that is and what governs that, how we know that from a cellular level, and then when should interventions begin, hopefully to forestall and delay that.
that's a really great point, Doc. You say when you have prevention, if it's at 20 years of age, for those listening, and that's like the process where it could start, and maybe it's different than the 30s and 40s. So, Wonderfeel, I've already noticed a difference taking Wonderfeel. And so, when we're talking about using the supplement, what is one of the main components of Wonderfeel, like the NAD that really goes in and helps us with that aging process? Could you describe that as well?
At the core of the aging process, really at the core of biology, is the NAD molecule. I can't think of
Oh,
any other molecule in the body that serves so many critical roles. I think it's up to 500 roles now. And not
whoa.
only that, it's not just tangential roles, but it's actually at the core of every cell because it governs energy. That's number one. It really does three things. Let's talk about what are the core
Mm-hmm. Let's see it.
roles or features of NAD. Number one is energy. Without
Okay.
energy, we don't actually exist. I mean, we need energy to beat our heart, to think, to run, to swallow. to digest, to procreate, to everything. Every single thing, every minute, every second depends on an adequate source of energy for myriad purposes. And NAD is critical to that because it is the link between breathing and bringing in oxygen and then creating the currency that we use in the body to express that energy, which is ATP. And NAD is the driver connecting all of that digestion, nutrition, oxygen coming in, breathing with the production of ATP. So without NAD, literally within 1 to 2 seconds, it would disappear. And that happens. There are certain circumstances, like if you have an occlusion of your coronary artery to your heart, where there's no blood coming in to, say, part of your heart, the NAD levels fall within 2 to 3 seconds. And then you see the ATP, after about a minute, it's gone. There's no
After a
energy.
minute,
So
it's gone.
yeah. So NAD is absolutely the quintessential way that we communicate with the environment to extract its resources, the oxygen and nutrition, and translate that into energetic currency, which we can utilize. So that's the first thing. Second thing that NAD governs is the defense against oxidant stress. We're living in oxygen. We breathe oxygen. Without oxygen, we wouldn't survive. And that's great. But the cost of that is that we are exposed to oxygen concentrations constantly, and they can wreak havoc unless the oxidants in the oxygen are defended against, are modulated, removed, sequestered, and so forth. And the way that happens is through a set of antioxidants in every cell. And the reduction of those antioxidants to have an electron available to kill the oxidant stress, to diffuse it, if you will, to diffuse the bomb, is have NAD. NAD creates a special molecule. It's its first cousin. We call it NADPH. It's NAD with a tag on it. And that's what arms the antioxidants to do their job. So without that, within minutes, we would have no defense against these oxygen-centered radicals, free radicals, and oxidants in our environment, and we would be defenseless. We would succumb, actually. So that's the second thing. Is it? Yeah. If you don't have an ability to defend yourself against the oxygen environment, you can't survive. That's the second thing. The third thing that NAD is critical for is preventing cancer, blocking malignancy. And this was what I worked on in the 90s that led to our invention. The fact is that every second of the day we are exposed to damage to our genes. Our genes are in the nucleus. They're not completely safe there. They're exposed to cosmic rays, which, if we're out in space, it's very intense. Here on Earth, it's still fairly intense. It's constant. There are damages, there are mutations that are potential in our DNA every 1 to 2 seconds from from cosmic rays. In addition, there's oxidant stress. The cells run on oxygen. That's the fuel, if you will. Right? Without oxygen, we can't produce ATP. But in the process of making ATP, we produce oxidants. That's the byproduct. Oxidants need to be removed very fast and efficiently. And if they're not, they enter the nucleus, and there they damage the DNA. And we have in the nucleus of the cell, surrounding our genes, a surveillance protein. It's an enzyme called PARP. It's there all the time. It's an enormous quantity in the nucleus. It's the second most abundant protein we have in the nucleus, and it's all over the genes. And it's scouring them every second, looking for any sign of gene damage. And we have, on average, about 70 hits, 70 damages a minute. So it's out 70? There. It's every minute of the day. It's out there, it's scouring, it's looking, and it finds them. When it finds them, it gloms onto them. It sticks to the site of the damage, and then it recruits all the elements, all the proteins and other cofactors in the cell that need to be brought to bear to fix the damage. But it's done. It leaves the point that's been repaired. But this constant process of reconnoitering, of surveillance, followed by repair, is something that keeps us alive. If it weren't there, and there are individuals where it's dysfunctional, like women with BRCA deficiency, you've heard about that. They have like a 90% chance of breast cancer before they're 30. If it's not, there will be cancer. That's for sure. So
Whoa.
the way that PARP protein works is completely dependent, entirely dependent on NAD. So if you don't have NAD, let's think about these three things. Number one, you're out of energy. So you
Yes.
have dysfunction.
Yes.
Number two, you can't defend yourself against oxidants. So you get all manner of damage from that. And number three, you'll get cancer. So for all three reasons, he is the most important, in my opinion, the most important molecule, and is certainly the central conductor of the cell that keeps us healthy. And therefore, in aging, it is curious what happens to NAD levels. And now we know, after several decades of research, that actually the NAD levels are not stable as we get older. They go down significantly.
And so
They drop
it's
by half.
significantly, by half.
Yeah. It's like running a
Doc,
car with half a tank, half a motor. By the time you're in your 50s and 60s, half the motor in your car is gone, basically. So you're going to have a higher risk of,
wow.
you're not going to be as active. You're not going to run as far. You're not going to jump as high. You're not going to defend yourself against oxidants.
And this is amazing, Doc. You say those 3 points, and the PARP protein, is it PARP, Doc? I'm writing notes down. I love writing notes. Is it PARP?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So they're going out and they look for damage. I know you said this, but I have to I always try to recall in my head. They're going out looking for damaged parts. They find the damaged parts within your cells, and then they call in recruits. They recruit other things that are needed. The NAD helps accentuate and helps this thing clean out.
That's exactly right.
With the NAD, Doc, how much, because I have the Wonderful is amazing and it has other components that I want to talk about, but how much in the day would a person need NAD? How much milligrams or micrograms would be needed for NAD, like for a substantial amount to help with this process to clean up?
Well, one of the exciting questions is, if you see something falling that's important, like NAD, how do you keep it stable? I mean, that's a fundamental question. How can we do that? Well, the initial thought was, if NAD is falling, then we should probably try to give NAD. I mean, it makes sense. Boost it up because it's falling down. Unfortunately, that was tried. Unfortunately, the NAD that you give someone, say orally or even IV, it can't get into the cells. It's restricted of the way it's structured. It carries a very powerful negative charge. It's very polar. It can't cross the lipid membrane of the cell. So it stays outside the cell where it doesn't do any good. So the concept of giving NAD to fix this problem of falling NAD levels, unfortunately, that didn't work. So then people said, well, what else can we do? Well, it turns out that there are two other precursors of NAD, molecules that are built up to become NAD, and luckily for us, those molecules can cross the cell membrane and get into the cell. They can. One of them is called NR, and which is nicotinamide riboside. It's nicotinamide with a sugar attached to it. And then when that is grown a little bit longer, added to it, it forms NMN. You add a phosphate to that, you get NMN. And those molecules get in. NMN is the better of the two because there's a special shuttle in the cell membrane that whisks it across from outside to inside. And that's why when we designed our product, we chose NMN as a supplement. We thought, well, NAD levels are low, so we'll give NMN. The NMN gets into the cell, and then the cell has a series of 3 enzymes that rapidly and immediately convert that to NAD. Okay, so the concept is there. They're low on something, you give it back to them, they swallow it, gets into their blood, goes into their cells, the levels rise of NAD. That concept was validated, both in animals and in humans. That's not in dispute anymore. The problem, though, Where it got more complex was that
Uh-huh.
it turns out that there are also things in the cell that destroy NAD. So you can
Oh.
pump up the level, you can boost it, but then you have to contend with the countervailing influence of these other processes which reduce NAD. They actually cut like a scissors. They come in and they cut it in half. So it's not present. And the chief culprit amongst those processes is another enzyme called CD38. And this has really captivated my mind because as my career is sort of near the end, but this is the molecule that I think is going to be the most important molecule in my studies, and I think really for the next 50 years, because this molecule seems to be, it's a little early still, but it really seems to be possibly one of the major clues to aging.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason
Very
for
clues.
that is that, and I'm talking once we pass through our 20s, the levels of CD38 in our body rise. They rise in nearly all tissues, and some tissues a lot. For example, in the ovary, they rise like crazy. So by the time you're in
Really?
your mid 40s to early 50s, very high levels. So the NAD that's in the ovary gets chopped up. It's gone.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And if when NAD levels collapse in the ovary, you have no ATP, and the eggs that you're with as a girl, they can't get out. You don't have ovulation. You enter menopause because you can't ovulate anymore. There's not enough energy to literally get the egg out of the ovary. The NAD levels have plummeted because CD38 there is so high, it's just carving it up. It's destroying it. So with that, and
Wow.
this is not true just in the ovary, of course, it's true in many, many, many tissues. So what do you do
Did,
about that? Well,
yeah, that's what would you
the,
do,
the
doc? I mean,
supplement supplements are great. They boost up your NAD levels, as I said, but unfortunately, then those levels will go down again because there's a CD38 out there that's chewing it up. So it would be logical to treat someone with a combination of both a boosting of the NAD, for example, or NR, and then concomitantly to include in that approach, in that capsule, a means to inhibit the activity of CD38 to stop it from working so well, so it can't chew up the stuff that the NAD that's being made. And that
wow.
was what inspired us to create a combination cocktail, if you will, in which our product, Junger, has a number of elements, several of which are directed at slowing down the activity of CD38.
And is that the one, doc, that the olive extract and they have the components of the cocktail? So it has
Well,
ergotheanine. Like, is that a couple of the product components that are helping with that issue?
we have really four major components in the preparation. Fifth component, vitamin D, that's has other purposes, but the four major components here that should occupy our attention are NMN, which I've mentioned. That's 900
Mm-hmm.
milligrams, which boosts up the level of NAD. And then we have resveratrol, which is derived from grapes and is a
Mm-hmm.
powerful antioxidant. So it prevents the oxidation, which I'll come back to later as that pertains to NAD. And resveratrol also has an effect on CD38. It interacts with another molecule called apigenin, which then inhibits a CD38 quite efficiently. And then hydroxytyrosol, which is from olive oil and is very prevalent in the Mediterranean diet, also has an effect on blocking CD38. The ergothioneine, which is from mushrooms, is a natural amino acid, and it's a fantastic antioxidant. They're all natural. They're from mushroom, olive oil, and grapes. And that is important in aging too, because the oxidant injury in the cell, it does many things, but one of the worst things it does, and this is happening all of the time, is it can
Mm-hmm.
actually go into the nucleus and damage the DNA. And
Oh
I
man.
published on this extensively from 94 to 97. And we discovered the different oxidants and how they damage DNA. But believe me, they do. And
Mm-hmm.
when they cause this damage to DNA in the cell, in the nucleus of the cell, PARP, which is scouring, looking around for damage, it sees the damage and it attempts to repair it. And so PARP then sticks to the damage that the oxidant has. And when it recruits those factors I mentioned to come in and fix it, to repair the damage, PARP uses NAD to do that. And when it uses NAD, it cuts it in half. So PARP is a vacuum cleaner for NAD. It consumes vast quantities of NAD. If you have a heart attack and PARP is active, all these oxidants pour into your genes within about 1 to 2 minutes of having a heart attack. The whole nucleus is covered with reams of oxidants. The DNA is
Wow.
damaged within 2 to 3 minutes. And you can see this huge, like a Christmas tree, damage everywhere in your heart. And then PARP is activated like crazy around 2 to 3 minutes. It brings in the NAD to fix the damage, and it cuts the NAD. And by 4 minutes, the NAD levels after a heart attack are zero. And then without NAD, you can't make ATP, and the cell dies, and that's called a heart attack. The cell dies, the tissue dies. You have
Whoa.
So in this sense, the antioxidants which we have included, the
Mm-hmm.
hydroxytyrosol, the resveratrol, the ergothioneine, they are protecting our DNA and therefore minimizing the damage to the DNA, thereby minimizing the need for PARP to get in there and do its thing and use NAD. So this is another way to protect the levels of NAD by not placing the demand from PARP on the system. If there's no DNA damage, you
Mm.
don't need PARP, you don't need the NAD. The NAD levels are sustained. So all of these interlocking concepts were built into this idea. How do we keep NAD levels stable? How do we boost them up? And how do we prevent their decline once they've been boosted up?
You were thinking of every single angle, Doc, when you formulated this so that you could make the correct ratios within the supplement. And basically, it's a really great way of helping the cells conserve energy with the ratios you've put into the supplement. With this, Doc, I was going to ask you, when you have NAD supplements out there, and I'm not trying to bash any other forms or any other research, when they say they're coming across into the cell, like you're using different components to get across the cells, is there there's many people that do like NAD injections or NAD, like is there any problems with that kind of application? I hope I'm not trying to step on anybody else's toes when they do NAD, but what is the concept there as well?
Well, initially, it was a very exciting idea. I mean, you're going to provide NAD IV to the body. You come into the hospital, you get an angiocath, you get an IV catheter that's put into your vein. They put a drip there, and you put NAD into the body directly. The idea seemed pretty good.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Unfortunately, what happened is that when the NAD gets into your blood, after all, you're putting it into a vein directly, um,
mm-hmm.
it circulates around, but it can't traverse the cell membrane. It bumps into the cell membrane, but it can't get across. And so there's not much that can happen. I mean, eventually it gets converted to NMN in the blood, and
uh,
some of that NMN can then get back in. But it's really a lot of trouble for something that doesn't have to be so complicated. I mean, when you
yes.
swallow NMN, it's absorbed by the intestine. It goes into your blood and it circulates and it goes into the cells. So it's anytime you have an oral medication or an oral
Mm-hmm,
supplement, an oral
mm-hmm.
anything, it's easier. I mean, that's how we eat food. We don't generally eat intravenously. We get our nutrition by going to the hospital and getting an IV and then putting food into our veins. I mean, we do that in
Mm-hmm.
the hospital for people who have lost their liver or people who
Mm-hmm.
can't, have lost their intestine. Yes, then we give intravenous nutrition. But it's a very roundabout, complex, expensive, and painful way to do that. The better thing is to swallow something orally that gets absorbed. And that's what we have, and that's what others have. And most of the community is using oral supplements because of the simplicity.
Yes, yes. Um, and when we talk about the longevity of the cells, and when you talk about how NAD helps with CD38 and it helps with the whole mechanism within the cell, is it too late for somebody to take NMN or the Wonderfeel like in an age? So we're talking about after age 40 or 50 or 60. So I know some of my patients would say, Doc, is it too late for me to take this because the damage is already done? Or is it okay to start taking it at any age?
It's okay to take it at any age because aging is progressive. Aging doesn't
Mm.
begin at 20 and end at 50. As you well know, people in their 60s are not like when they're 50 and 70 and 80 and so forth. I mean, we just look at the basic things. I mean, in a 90-year-old, we have changes in the skin, elasticity, brown spots, changes in hair color, loss of hair. All of these are dependent on aging processes, many of which are governed by NAD. We know that the risk of cancer goes up during those 30, 40 years. I mean, prostate cancer goes to, I think, 95% of all men by the age of 100. So every decade that you age, there are numerous changes in aging. Aging does not begin and end while we're living. I mean, ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
when we die, we're still aging.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it is a continuous
Anytime.
process. You can begin at any time. Of course, it makes some logical sense to initiate uh, supplementation earlier so that you forestall or slow potentially the ravages of aging at a young age. Why would you wait till you're 70 when you could start when you're 20? It doesn't make sense. I mean, you might as well
Yes.
slow down the process. The earlier, the better.
Yes. And for patients, um, doctors that are on, let's say, heart medications, and maybe this is a very, it's a very general question, but there are some people that are going to say, like, I'm on heart medications. Would this really help bump up the strength of the heart? I mean, it sounds like it would, but it's safe for people who have, like, maybe on blood thinners and things like that. How does that whole realm go towards NMN and NAD?
Anybody who's getting medications from their doctor should clearly check with them if they take any kind of physical supplements. Okay, so I don't want to give any medical advice here in that way. And we're not
Mm-hmm.
talking about claiming any kind of disease amelioration specifically, because that would require a pharmaceutical product that's
Mm-hmm.
been through the FDA and has shown benefit in a clinical trial for some type of clinical improvement. Okay, so we're not a pharmaceutical company and we can't make claims to disease improvement or amelioration. And I do recommend that anybody talk to their physician if they have medical problems and they want to take any kind of change in exercise, nutrition, supplements, medications. Of course, you want to do that in consultation with your doctor.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no theoretical reason why augmenting NAD in all of these settings would not be helpful. I mean,
Okay.
for example, if say you have congestive heart failure and you're on
Mm-hmm.
medications to improve the contractility and the strength of your heart, that is entirely linked to the ability of the heart to use NAD and ATP to contract. The muscle of the
Wow.
heart uses ATP with every single beat. If you deprived the heart of oxygen, so it couldn't beat, it couldn't contract, couldn't make ATP and NAD, that's a heart attack. If you did that to the brain, it's called a stroke. So
Mm-hmm.
all of
Mm-hmm.
these things are NAD dependent. And on first principles, one would assume that supplementation and improvement sustenance of NAD is a good thing in any of these conditions. But as I say, you should always do this in consult with your physician.
That definitely, Doc. That's great. That's great advice. And where do you see when you're talking about you're going to investigate CD38? So you're investigating age and longevity. Where do you see longevity, the research going? I know it could be vast and expansive. Or do you see like a rapid increase of like knowledge within the next 5 years, or you're saying it's already happening? Where do you see the research going?
In a number of areas. First of all, I think people will understand some of the diverse mechanisms that are governing regulation of aging and of NAD. I've mentioned a number of them that regulate
Mm-hmm.
NAD. There are others that we will find and better understand. That's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
So a better knowledge of the aging process. We call it senescence, the act of getting older. And there's a lot of excitement in the research field about that right now. Second thing is that from an interventional perspective, people are coming up with newer ways to combat this senescence process. In the CD38 instance, which I'm most interested in, the products that people are using today to retard the activity of CD38 so that NAD levels are sustained, they're okay.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
certainly possible in theory to produce much more CD38 inhibitors, molecules that block that enzyme, that preserve NAD levels better, and that allow us to age more slowly. That's an active
Mm-hmm.
field of pharmaceutical research. We're actually ourselves at Wonderfield very engaged in that. We have a whole research program where we're making improved molecules that block CD38, studying them, and then hopefully ultimately getting them to the clinic. So this, I think, is a very prominent part of the next 5 years. I think over the next 20 to 30 years, as we gather much more knowledge about what underlies aging in much more detail, there will be new ideas and interventions which we can't even imagine today that will,
Wow.
I think, improve health span, which is the quality of life. And I
Mm-hmm.
do believe also the longevity. I think people will live into the 130s, 150s, say,
Wow.
30, 40 years from now. I think the lifespan of humans will be in that range.
Wow, Doc. Could you imagine somebody going to 150? I mean, I couldn't
Yeah.
even believe it if that was happening. So, do
At the turn of the century in 1900, the average lifespan for an American male was 49.
what?
Think about that. Yeah. Yeah. That's not that long ago.
49.
49.
That wasn't that.
Yeah. No.
So,
And if we go
when
back further, go back
Mhm.
to, 5 to 10,000, let's say 10,000 years ago, right when farming began. Farming
Mhm.
began around 8 to 10,000 years ago in the Middle East. At that point, where you have a hunter-gatherer population before farming, the average age of death was around 24 to 25. So we evolved
Whoa.
all of these things I've talked about genetically that have evolved to create someone who is successful in getting 25 and reproductively fertile. That's why when we talk about menopause at the ages of 45 or 50, where the CD38 has come up and the NAD levels in the ovary have come down, this didn't exist at that time. So there was no
Yes.
reason
Yes.
there was no evolutionary advantage to prevent that because everybody had died by the age of 25. So there's been a
That is
tremendous change in our
astounding.
expectations. You know,
So, when we've had this track record, this history, I know it's probably just this is getting too far ahead of ourselves, or maybe not. But you're looking at the lab work, you're looking at the blood work, because some people out there are going to say, "Okay, doc, what would I need to look at as a general thing on my blood work that would tell me?" I know everybody needs to take this because the research is amazing. But are there certain signs and signals that a person should look into and say, "Hey, I need to get on this pretty fast"?
at the moment, we're recommending this generally as something that people should consider in their 20s. But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, since our goal in the nutraceutical supplement here is to bolster NAD levels, it would be more logical if there were a lab test that was easily available,
Mm-hmm.
inexpensive, that could measure your NAD levels. Then, like with cholesterol, for example, or blood pressure, I mean, people
Mm-hmm.
take blood pressure medicine, and the way they do that is to titrate that against a measurement. The doctor takes a measurement of your blood pressure. If it isn't low enough, they give you more medication. If it's too extreme, they might lower your medication. It's adjusted according to a measurement. Same thing with
Mm-hmm.
cholesterol. Am I taking enough? too much, unnecessary. I measure my
Yes.
lipid levels and I get the results back and I make changes based on the information. In the field of aging, we don't have any measurements of NAD that are, I mean, they're
Mm-hmm.
available in a research level, but certainly not community. And that's a shame. Were there
Mm-hmm.
that type of measurement available, one could then titrate the dosing of various approaches and calibrate that. You know, I assume, like most things in medicine, that each person's an individual and will have a different response. Some people respond more, some people respond less. And so that's why you
Mm-hmm.
need to measure the output, the endpoint that you're seeking in order to assure yourself that your intervention has been effective.
Wow. This is really opening. I love the conversation, Dr. Salzman, about the interactions of molecules within the cells. I've always been really intrigued. I like processes, and for everybody out there listening, the aspect of how this thing works has been so enlightening, and I want people to see that the physical, components working on each other within the cells, but it has
Mhm.
profound effects for your aging and overall quality of life. Because I always tell myself, Doc, that I
Mhm.
always want my mind, I always want my mobility, and you need to be preventative. So this is one of the best ways. We start in 20s, but if you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, we need to start taking these things and helping your bodies
Right.
heal.
I mean,
And
one thing we can do at a higher level, it's not
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
at an NAD level, but at a higher level, we can people who take the product. And so at
mm-hmm,
Wonderfield, we're extremely good listeners. We
mm-hmm,
listen to the customers and we get reports back. In fact, we keep a registry, and we've just published, about to publish, we've had accepted for publication a wonderful article uh, characterizing the responses that we have observed, that we've received voluntarily from
mm-hmm,
customers. And for example, we've had people who, particularly with arthritis, and who are
mm-hmm.
back there playing tennis, or we've had people with vascular dementia. I remember one woman from Australia with bad vascular dementia who was a crossword puzzle fanatic, couldn't do anything at all. I mean, just very confused. Started taking Wonderfield's products, and then within about a month and a half, we got a letter from her husband saying that his wife was avidly back doing crossword puzzles. So it's that kind of feedback that we get, which is gratifying and encouraging. And it tells us a couple things. One, that our approach seems to make sense. Customers seem to be reporting some positive things. It doesn't give us information on their NAD levels. That would be far better, but it's an
Mm-hmm.
encouraging first step.
That is real. That is very encouraging, because the reason I asked some of these questions, Doc, is because I've had some immediate family members that really need extra work, like even my mom and my dad, and I could tell just from what you're talking about, I could see signs and symptoms that they need to start on this, and I'm going to start on them today. Like it'll be happening, and
Mhm.
um, I'm very, very thankful and grateful for you sharing your time. I know it's very valuable, and you're a very busy man, but I really appreciate you sharing this with us. And with longevity and aging, there are steps, there are things we can do, everyone out there, that could actually help with your aging process to actually help you age well.
Well,
So, Dr. Salzman, how can people find you? How can people find Wonderfield? Can you give us the website, the social media, or anything that you can give us to have people point us in your direction?
Wonderfield.com is the website. And of course, when people go on there, they can learn about the people behind it, the product. They can learn where to get it. They can buy it. So there are all kinds of ways there to become a part of our family, if you will, and to find out about what we're doing. And of course, as we have new developments, new products coming out, which we will in the next year, this will be an opportunity to keep people updated on all of that as well. So we encourage people to go to the website.
Oh, it's been a really good conversation, Dr. Solomon. Any ever other advancements that you coming along and you're finding, and anything you'd like to discuss, please come back here with us and talk to us about it.
Of
You're a wealth
course,
of knowledge, I can
thank you.
tell. Very, very articulate and so brilliant. Appreciate you so much. I thank you. And
Thank you
everyone
for the
out there,
opportunity.
I'm just grateful. And please, everyone, I really mean this from all my heart. Just look into Wonderfeel and get this. And it is one of the things that I've already started, taking and started to feel. Like I always feel my muscles always feel stronger, doc. Whenever if I know there's some advancement like in my physiology, it's really because working on patients throughout the day, it's my hip and my arm strength, my shoulders. I know if something's up when I'm sore. And thankfully, like when the soreness goes away, I know it works. Like that's why I get so adamant about it. So everyone out there, pick up some Wonderfeel. We're going to have links at the bottom of the caption in the show notes and all the information to show where Dr. Salzman's at with Wonderfeel. And if you guys have any questions, please send us comments and like and subscribe. If you know anybody that has an issue with aging, seriously, and needs help, send this over to them, forward this over to them. And we're just grateful that you're here on with us, Dr. Salzman. And from all of us here, everybody out there from the Ancient Health Podcast, thank you guys so much, and we'll talk soon.